Days they let me go, the HR director didn't even look up from her laptop. She slid a single sheet of paper across the conference table, my termination letter, and said my position had been eliminated due to restructuring. Like that. Flat. No eye contact. No hesitation. Like she was reading off a grocery list, and I was somewhere between paper towels and dish soap. I remember thinking, I closed a $47 million contract 3 weeks ago. I flew to Houston, sat across from their legal team for 6 hours straight, flew back the same night, and delivered the biggest single deal this division had ever seen. And now I'm sitting here, watching her type something, probably her lunch order, while my 12 years at this company end on a Tuesday morning. I picked up the paper. I signed nothing. I said thank you, because that's how I was raised. And I left. My name is Adrian Cole, and 51 years old. And what happened over the next 4 months changed everything I thought I knew about how power works and who actually holds it. I came to Strathmore Logistics in my late 30s after a decade bouncing between mid-size freight companies in the Midwest. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. My father drove a delivery truck for 30 years. My mother did bookkeeping for a dental office. Neither of them went to college, but both of them hammered the same thing into me from the time I could understand English. Read everything you sign. Read it twice. Then read it again. I didn't go to law school. I have a business degree from Ohio State and enough scar tissue from bad deals to know what I don't know. So when Strathmore recruited me in my late 30s to head up their strategic accounts division, I brought a lawyer. His name was Clifton. An old friend from my Columbus days, real estate attorney, sharpest reader of contract language I've ever known. We sat in his kitchen one Saturday morning. The offer letter spread across the table beside our coffee cups, and he went through it line by line. Most of it was standard. Base salary, benefits, non-solicitation clause, standard termination terms. But buried in section 14, and I mean buried after 3 pages of compensation structure, was a paragraph that Clifton circled in red pen. In the event of termination without cause, it read, "The employee shall be entitled to a bonus equivalent to 4% of the company's net profit for the fiscal quarter in which termination occurs, calculated based on audited financials." Clifton looked at me. Did they offer you this, or did their lawyer put this in by mistake? I didn't know. I hadn't asked for it. It was already there. "You want me to flag it?" he asked. I thought for about 5 seconds. "No," I said. "Leave it." He laughed a little. "Okay then." I signed the contract. I started the following Monday. And for 12 years, I never once thought about Section 14 again. My first few years at Strathmore were lean. The division was underperforming when I got there. 3 major accounts in the red, a sales team that had stopped believing in the product, and a VP above me who took credit for everything and blamed his people for everything else. I kept my head down. I rebuilt the client relationships one by one. I flew to Atlanta, to Dallas, to Seattle. I learned what our clients actually needed versus what we were selling them. Slowly, things turned around. By year 5, I was running the whole Eastern region. By year 8, I was managing 14 account directors and a book of business worth over $300 million annually. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't send company-wide emails celebrating my wins. I just worked. There was one person who noticed. His name was Marcus. Not a Marcus in my story. That was someone else's. I mean my direct report, a young guy named Derek Osei who had joined us straight out of Penn State and who was, genuinely, the most talented account manager I'd seen in years. Smart, methodical, honest with clients even when it cost us short term. I mentored him for 4 years. I fought to get him promoted twice when HR pushed back. He was the kind of person who made the whole team better just by being in the room. And there was Pauline. She'd been the division's operations coordinator since before I got there. Late 50s, had seen 7 managers come and go, knew where everybody was buried in the filing system, and had more institutional knowledge than the entire leadership team combined. She never got the recognition she deserved. I made sure she got it from me, at least. Those two, Derek and Pauline, were the people I trusted. In 12 years, they never gave me a reason not to. The trouble started about 8 months before I was fired, though I didn't know that's what it was at the time. The company went through a private equity acquisition. A firm out of Boston, Halloran Capital, bought a controlling stake, installed 2 new board members, and brought in a new COO named Stuart Briggs. Stuart was 54, ex-McKinsey, wore French cuffs to internal meetings, and had the kind of confidence that comes from never having been wrong in front of anyone who could tell him so. From day one, Stuart and I had friction. Not dramatic, not open conflict, just a low, steady current of incompatibility. He liked PowerPoints with slides that had 3 bullet points and nothing else. I liked detail. He wanted account reviews that lasted 30 minutes. I knew our major clients required 2 hours of real conversation. He thought relationships were transactional. I knew they were everything. 3 months after Stuart arrived, I got called into a meeting with him and the CFO, a quiet, careful man named Gerald who I'd always gotten along with, and they told me they were restructuring the commission model for strategic accounts. Effective immediately, my team's bonus structure would shift from percentage of revenue to a fixed quarterly payout. I pushed back, not aggressively. I laid out the numbers, showed how the current model had driven a 40% increase in account retention over 4 years, explained that my best people, Derek especially, would walk if the incentive changed. Stuart nodded through all of it, then said the decision had already been made. I left that meeting and called Clifton that evening. Not about Section 14. I wasn't thinking about that yet. Just venting, really. The way you do with an old friend when something is wrong but you can't quite name it. "Watch your back," Clifton said. When they change the comp structure right after a PE deal, they're usually pre-positioning to either sell the team or cut from the top. I told him I thought I was fine. I just closed the Houston deal. $47 million, the largest single contract in division history. No one was cutting the person who just did that. Famous last words, he said. The call came on a Thursday, not even from Stuart, from HR, a woman I'd met maybe twice in 12 years, pleasant enough, nothing personal about her, who asked if I could come in Friday morning for a brief meeting. When I asked what it was about, she said it was about my role going forward. I knew. I think most people know before they're told. You just don't want to be the one who says it first. Friday morning, I put on a good suit, not because I thought it would change anything, just because my father always said you wear your best when something important is happening, even if it's happening to you. I sat across from the HR director. Her name was Karen, and she was perfectly professional, just doing her job. And she told me that Strathmore had made the difficult decision to eliminate my position as part of a strategic realignment. Effective immediately. I would receive 2 weeks of severance for every year of service per company policy. That's 24 weeks, she said. 6 months. I did the math. 24 weeks of base salary, no bonus, no equity acceleration, nothing related to the Houston deal or anything else I'd built. I picked up the termination letter. Read it. Didn't sign anything. Said thank you. And then I went to my car and sat there for about 20 minutes, not moving. My daughter called me while I was sitting there. She's 23 in her first year of nursing school in Cincinnati, and I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't talk yet. I needed to be still for a minute. The thing that kept coming back to me wasn't the salary. It wasn't even the indignity of it. It was the timing. Strathmore's fiscal quarter ended on September 30th. I was terminated on September 20th, 10 days before the quarter closed. 10 days. I'd been at the company long enough to know that Q3 was going to be exceptional. The Houston deal alone pushed us well past projections. The audited numbers weren't out yet, but I'd seen the internal forecasts. The quarter's net profit was going to land somewhere between $38 and $42 million. 10 days. They fired me 10 days before those numbers locked. I sat in that parking lot, and for the first time in 12 years I thought about Section 14. I called Clifton from the car. "Do you still have my Strathmore contract?" I asked. "Give me 2 minutes," he said. I heard him moving, a drawer opening, some rustling. Then, "Yeah, I've got it." "Section 14, I said. A pause. Then I heard him exhale slowly. "Adrian," he said. 4% of net quarterly profit. What's 4% of 40 million? He didn't answer right away. I heard him doing the math. 1.6 million, he said. "But that's if it's 40 million. Could be higher." "I know. Did they know this was in here when they fired you?" "That," I said, "is an excellent question. Here's what I didn't understand at the time and what became important later. After Stuart arrived, there being quiet conversations, ones I wasn't part of, about how the company's profit numbers were being categorized. A former colleague of mine, someone who had left the company voluntarily about a month before I was fired, reached out to me about 2 weeks after my termination. His name was Hugh Calloway, 20 years in logistics finance, meticulous, not someone who speculated. He asked if we could meet for coffee. We met at a diner near his house in Fairfax County. He ordered decaf. He was nervous in the way that careful people get nervous. Not shaking, just precise. He chose a table in the back corner and sat facing the door. He told me that in his last 60 days at Strathmore, he'd noticed anomalies in how certain revenue categories were being reclassified. Specifically, some items that would normally fall into operating profit were being moved into a reserve account, technically legal, but the kind of accounting treatment that, depending on intent, could be characterized as aggressive at best. "Why would they do that?" I asked, though I already had a theory. "Could be a lot of reasons," Hugh said. "Tax positioning, balance sheet optics for the PE firm, or," he paused, "making the profit number look smaller than it is right before a payout event." I sat with that. "You need to talk to a labor attorney," Hugh said, "not just a contract guy, someone who handles employment disputes." I nodded. "And Adrian?" He looked at me directly. "Whatever you do, don't sign the severance agreement until you've talked to someone." I hadn't. I'd left it unsigned on my kitchen counter for 11 days. My labor attorney's name was Beverly O'Conquo, mid-40s, had been doing employment law in Northern Virginia for 15 years, had a corner office in Arlington, and a reputation for not bluffing. My cousin had used her in a wrongful termination case 2 years prior, and described her as the calmest person you'll ever watch take someone apart in a conference room. I brought her the contract, the termination letter, and everything Hugh had told me with his permission, and with the caveat that he would not be a witness to anything that involved going public. Beverly read Section 14. She asked me 3 questions. Then she sat back. "This is enforceable," she said. "The language is clear. Termination without cause triggers the provision. They did not terminate you for cause. They called it a restructuring." "That's termination without cause," she said. "That's exactly what this clause covers. They're going to say my position was eliminated before the quarter ended, so the profit clause doesn't apply." She shook her head. "The clause specifies the quarter in which termination occurs. You were terminated September 20th. The quarter doesn't close until September 30th. You're squarely inside it." Then she asked me the harder question. "What do you know about how they're calculating that profit number?" I told her about Hugh, about the reclassifications, about the reserve account. She didn't flinch. "Then we need the audited financials," she said, "and we need to make clear to them, very clearly, before we file anything, that we know what questions to ask." Beverly sent a formal demand letter to Strathmore's legal team in mid-October. It was precise, professional, and absolutely unambiguous. It cited Section 14, the date of termination, the fiscal quarter at issue, and requested the audited Q3 financials within 15 business days. It also noted, in careful, measured language, that any discrepancies between internal forecasts and audited results would require explanation, and that we reserved the right to conduct independent financial review as part of any dispute resolution process. I know what happened on their end because their general counsel, a man named Victor who I'd interacted with briefly over the years and who struck me as fundamentally decent, later told me privately that the letter landed like a hand grenade. Stewart apparently had not told their legal team about Section 14. Let me say that again. The COO who authorized my termination had not disclosed to the company's own legal counsel that my contract contained a profit-sharing clause triggered by termination without cause. Whether that was incompetence or something more deliberate, I can't say with certainty. I have my suspicions. Their lawyers spent 3 weeks reviewing the contract, the termination documentation, and the Q3 financials. During that time, I signed nothing, said nothing publicly, and went to my daughter's nursing school orientation in Cincinnati, where I sat in a folding chair in a gymnasium and watched her receive her student ID badge and felt more proud of her than I had words for. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd been angry for about 48 hours, and then it had passed. What replaced it wasn't satisfaction exactly, more like a kind of clarity. I knew what was in the contract. I knew what they'd done. I knew my attorney was competent. There was nothing left to be anxious about. Beverly called me on a Monday morning in November. "They want to settle," she said. "They're not contesting the clause." "What are the audited numbers?" Q3 net profit came in at $41.9 million, she said. 4% of that is $1,676,000. I did the math. That's what they're offering. They're offering 1.4, she said. They want to negotiate down, plain partial quarter, or some other haircut. I told them there's no partial quarter provision in the language. It's the quarter in which termination occurs, period. What do you recommend? I recommend we tell them 1.676 is the number, and it's not negotiable. If they want to litigate, we'll litigate, but I don't think they want to litigate. Why not? She paused. Because if we litigate, we get full discovery on those Q3 financials, and they know we know about the reclassifications. I let that sit for a moment. Tell them that's the number, I said. They agreed within a week. $1,676,000 paid within 30 days in addition to the standard severance I was already owed. Total compensation from the separation, just over $2 million. They asked me to sign an NDA. I declined. My contract did not require me to sign one. Beverly made that point clearly. They pushed. We held. In the end, they paid without it. I want to be honest. $2 million sounds like justice, and in some ways it was. But I want to be clear about what it wasn't. It wasn't enough to undo 12 years of work that got attributed to someone else in a presentation I'll never see. It wasn't enough to replace the team I'd built. Derek and Pauline and the 7 other people on my staff who I genuinely cared about and who were now navigating a division being reshaped by someone who didn't understand it. It wasn't a verdict. There was no courtroom. Nobody at Strathmore issued a public statement acknowledging that they had terminated a high performer 10 days before a major payout and hoped he wouldn't notice. They just paid and moved on. What I did with the money is probably not what you'd expect. I put 2/3 of it into a irrevocable trust I'd been building for my daughter's future. The rest went into a small logistics consultancy I'd been thinking about starting for years. The kind of firm I wished had existed when I was 35 and trying to figure out how to build a client base from scratch. I hired 2 people in the first month. One of them was Derek. He'd resigned from Strathmore 3 weeks after I left, told me later that the culture had shifted almost immediately, that Stewart had consolidated control of his team's client relationships, that it no longer felt like somewhere he wanted to build a career. He took a pay cut to join me. I gave him an equity stake instead. Pauline retired. She'd been planning to for a year. My departure just accelerated the timeline. I threw her a retirement dinner at a restaurant in Reston that she'd always wanted to try, and I gave a toast that made her cry, and she made me promise to call her if I ever needed to complain about a client, because she said she'd miss that most. I missed her too. I still do. People ask me sometimes what the lesson is, what I tell someone who's going through something similar, and I always hesitate because I don't think my story is a template. I had a contract with specific language that happened to protect me. Not everyone does. I had the savings to wait out a legal process without panicking. Not everyone does. I had an attorney I trusted and a former colleague willing to share what he knew at some personal risk to himself. Not everyone does. So I don't want to say, read your contract, as if that's the whole answer. It's a start. But the bigger thing, the thing I keep coming back to, is this. They were counting on me not to remember. They fired me 10 days before the quarter closed because they believed I didn't know what was in my own contract. They believed 12 years of loyalty had softened my attention. They believed that a restructuring announcement and a severance package would be enough to make me sign, nod, and go quietly. I almost did. There were 2 days after the termination when I seriously considered just taking the severance. 6 months of salary felt real. The legal process felt uncertain and exhausting. I had a daughter in nursing school. I had a mortgage. I was tired in a way that went beyond the immediate situation. Tired the way you get when you've given a lot to something and then had it end on someone else's terms. But I didn't sign, partly because of Clifton's voice in my head from that Saturday morning years ago, reading section 14 out loud in his kitchen with a red pen, partly because of Hugh, who risked his own comfort to tell me what he'd seen, and partly, if I'm being honest, because something in me wasn't ready to let them be right about what they'd assumed. They assumed I wasn't paying attention. They were wrong. That's the whole story, really. The consultancy is in its 2nd year now. We have 11 clients, a team of 8, and a revenue number I'm proud of. I still fly to client meetings. I still sit across tables from legal teams for hours. I still come home tired in the way that work you believe in makes you tired, which is a completely different kind of tired than the other kind. My daughter passed her 1st-year clinical exams. She called me from the hospital parking lot after her shift, still in scrubs, and I could hear the exhaustion and the satisfaction in her voice. And I thought, that's it. That's what it looks like when someone is doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. I called Clifton that night too. We talked for a while about nothing in particular, the way old friends do. Before we hung up, he asked how I was really doing. Good, I said, and I meant it. I thought about section 14, about a paragraph in a contract that nobody on their side had read carefully enough, about a Tuesday morning when a woman slid a piece of paper across a conference table without looking up, about all the things they forgot, and I meant it. I've thought a lot about what actually happened, not the legal part, not the money, but the chain of choices that led to that Tuesday morning in the parking lot, and the chain that followed it. Stuart didn't fire me because I was underperforming. He fired me because I was in the way. That's a different thing entirely. And the reason he could do it so casually, so cleanly, the reason Karen could slide that paper across the table without looking up, is because they had already decided what kind of person I was. Someone who would take the severance, sign the paperwork, and disappear. Someone whose 12 years of careful, unglamorous, effective work had made him predictable, manageable, safe to discard. That assumption is what undid them. Not me, not Beverly, not Section 14, their own certainty about who I was. I think about the choices that built that moment, working backward. I think about Clifton sitting at his kitchen table with a red pen, reading a contract that most people would have skimmed. I think about the fact that I listened to him, that I left Section 14 in because something told me it mattered even though I couldn't say why. I think about 12 years of showing up, of doing the work without announcement, of building real relationships with clients instead of just managing them. None of that was strategy. It was just what I believed in. And then I think about Stuart, about a man who arrived at a company he didn't understand, decided he already knew everything he needed to know, and made a consequential decision based on an assumption he never bothered to verify. He assumed I was ordinary. He assumed I hadn't read my own contract. He assumed that loyalty makes people passive. Every one of those assumptions was a choice, and every choice had a consequence. That's the thing I keep coming back to, not justice in some abstract sense, the universe balancing its scales, the good rewarded and the wicked punished. I don't think it works that cleanly. I think what actually happens is simpler and harder. The choices we make accumulate, the corners we cut or refuse to cut, the documents we read or don't read, the people we protect or overlook. All of it adds up quietly over years until one morning it either holds or it doesn't. Derek took a pay cut to join my consultancy because I'd spent 4 years treating him like someone whose judgment mattered. That wasn't transactional on my end. I just believed it was true, but it meant that when I needed to build something new, I wasn't starting from nothing. Pauline spent 30 years being overlooked by every manager above her, and I gave her a proper send-off because she deserved one, not because I expected anything in return. Hugh met me at that diner and told me what he'd seen at some personal risk to himself because we'd always been straight with each other. None of those people owed me anything, but none of them let me down when it counted. I don't think I'm special for any of this. I got lucky in some real ways. The contract language, Clifton's attention to detail, the fact that I hadn't signed the severance yet when Hugh called. A lot of people in similar situations don't have those things and don't get the same outcome. I know that. I'm not standing here telling you the system works. What I'm saying is simpler. The choices you make about how to treat people, how carefully you read what you sign, whether you hold your ground when it's inconvenient, those choices matter, not because the world is fair and fairness will be rewarded, but because the choices you make become the resources you have when things go wrong. They forgot my contract. I hadn't. That's all it was.